What if everything you thought you knew about the deepest spiritual truths was just scratching the surface? What if the most profound teachings ever spoken were hidden in plain sight, waiting for you to discover their true meaning while your conscious mind rests and your soul awakens? Tonight, as you drift into the sacred space between waking and sleeping, you're about to encounter something extraordinary. These aren't just stories you heard in Sunday school or verses you memorized as a child. These are the revolutionary teachings that transformed hearts, challenged empires, and continue to change lives 2,000 years later. But people miss. The deepest wisdom here's what most wasn't always spoken in obvious ways. It was woven into parables, hidden in metaphors, and embedded in moments that seem simple on the surface, but contain layers of meaning that can take a lifetime to fully understand. You see, when someone speaks truth that powerful, it doesn't just inform your mind, it rewrites your reality. And as your body relaxes and your thoughts quiet, your spirit becomes more receptive to truths that your busy analytical mind might normally resist or overlook. This isn't about religion or doctrine. This is about discovering principles so fundamental, so universally applicable, that they've guided seekers, mystics, and everyday people for millennia. Think about this for a moment. What kind of teachings could be so profound that they would still be studied, debated, and lived by billions of people across every culture, every continent, every generation? What words could carry such power that they would outlast empires, survive persecution, and continue to offer hope in humanity's darkest hours? You're about to find out. But before we dive deeper, let me tell you something that might surprise you. The most transformative spiritual insights often come not when we're straining to understand, but when we're in a state of receptive peace. When our defenses are down, when our need to analyze and categorize is quiet, when we're simply open to receiving truth, however it wants to reveal itself. That's why this journey is designed for these quiet hours, when your soul can wisdom absorb without interference from the chattering mind that so often stands guard at the door of deeper understanding. Tonight, you'll discover teachings about love that go beyond emotion into the realm of cosmic force. You'll encounter insights about forgiveness that can literally rewire your relationship with every person who has ever hurt you. You'll explore concepts of abundance that have nothing to do with material wealth and everything to do with the infinite nature of your true identity. And you'll uncover truths about fear, suffering, and transformation that can shift your entire perspective on what it means to be human. These teachings have been called radical, revolutionary, even dangerous by those in power throughout history. Why? Because they don't just offer comfort, they offer liberation. They don't just promise a better afterlife, they reveal how to experience heaven right here, right now, in the midst of ordinary life. They don't just talk about God as something distant and separate. They point to the divine presence that lives within you, waiting to be recognized and expressed through every interaction, every choice, every moment of your existence. Here's what makes this different from everything else you've ever heard about these teachings. We're not going to talk about them as historical artifacts or religious concepts. We're going to explore them as living principles that are as relevant and powerful today as they were 2,000 years ago. We're going to discover how these ancient words speak directly to modern struggles, how they address anxiety, loneliness, purpose, relationships, money, success, failure, and every other challenge you face in contemporary life. You know what's fascinating? These teachings were originally shared with ordinary people: fishermen, tax collectors, farmers, merchants, mothers, outcasts, people dealing with real problems, real pain, real questions about how to live. The wisdom wasn't locked away in temples or reserved for scholars. It was given freely to anyone who had ears to hear and a heart willing to receive. And that includes you, right here, right now. As you settle deeper into rest, your mind naturally becomes more receptive to subtle truths. The barriers that normally filter and judge information begin to dissolve. Your heart opens to possibilities your logical mind might dismiss. This is the perfect state for encountering teachings that work on multiple levels simultaneously. They meet you wherever you are, but they also invite you into deeper understanding, greater compassion, and more authentic living. Let me share something with you about the nature of these teachings that most people completely miss. They weren't designed to create followers. They were designed to create awakened human beings. They weren't meant to establish a religion. They were meant to restore humanity to its true nature. They weren't intended to separate the sacred from the ordinary. They were given to help people recognize the sacred within the ordinary, the divine within the human, the eternal within the temporal. This is why these words have such enduring power. They don't just tell you what to believe, they show you how to see. They don't just give you rules to follow, they reveal principles that, when understood and applied, naturally lead to wisdom, compassion, and inner peace. They don't just promise rewards in some distant future, they offer transformation in this very moment. And here's perhaps the most beautiful part: these teachings meet you exactly where you are. If you're struggling with anger, they offer a path to peace. If you're wrestling with fear, they reveal the source of courage. If you're feeling lost, they provide direction. If you're experiencing abundance, they show you how to share it wisely. If you're facing scarcity, they open your eyes to resources you never knew existed. But they do more than just address your current situation. They expand your understanding of what's possible for human life. They challenge assumptions you didn't even know you had. They invite you to consider that perhaps the limitations you've accepted aren't as fixed as you thought, that maybe the problems you've been trying to solve have solutions you haven't yet imagined, that possibly the life you've been living is just a fraction of what's actually available to you. As we begin this journey together, I want you to know that there's no right way to receive these teachings. Some people find their minds filled with new insights. Others experience shifts in their emotional landscape. Some notice changes in their relationships or circumstances. Others simply feel a deep sense of peace or connection they can't quite explain. All of these responses are perfect. Trust whatever happens for you. The teachings we're about to explore have been called the greatest story ever told, but they're not really a story at all. They're a map, a guide for navigating the human experience with grace, wisdom, and love. They're instructions for living that work whether you're facing triumph or tragedy, abundance or loss, clarity or confusion. They're principles that remain constant even when everything around you is changing. Tonight, as you rest, you're going to discover why these particular teachings have had such extraordinary influence throughout history. Not because they were spoken by someone famous, though they were, not because they've been preserved in ancient texts, though they have been, but because they reveal timeless truths about the nature of reality, the purpose of existence, and the unlimited potential that lives within every human heart. You're about to encounter insights about the power of intention, the reality of miracles, the nature of true wealth, the secret of lasting happiness, and the path to inner freedom. These aren't abstract concepts, they're practical wisdom that can transform how you approach every aspect of your daily life. They're tools for creating the kind of existence that most people only dream about, but few believe is actually possible. So, as you allow yourself to sink deeper into comfort and peace, prepare to receive not just information, but transformation, not just knowledge, but wisdom, not just concepts, but living truth that has the power to change everything about how you see yourself, others, and the world around you. The journey begins now. The first teaching that most people completely misunderstand is perhaps the most revolutionary statement ever made about human identity. It wasn't whispered in secret halls or reserved for the enlightened few. It was declared openly, boldly, in bed at its implications, front of crowds who gas. When you truly grasp what was being revealed, it will shatter every limitation you've ever accepted about who you are and what you're capable of becoming. You've heard the words before, you might have even repeated them, but tonight, as your mind settles into receptive stillness, you're going to understand them in a way that penetrates far beyond intellectual comprehension. This teaching reveals something so fundamental about your true nature that mystics have spent lifetimes trying to fully embody its meaning. Yet it was spoken so simply that even children could understand it. The teaching is this: you are not separate from the divine source of all creation, not metaphorically, not symbolically, literally. The same consciousness that moves the stars, that causes flowers to bloom, that maintains the perfect balance of every ecosystem on Earth, that consciousness lives within you, not as a visitor, not as a borrowed presence, as your deepest, truest identity. But here's where it gets even more extraordinary. This isn't just a beautiful philosophical concept designed to make you feel special. It's a practical truth with immediate, tangible implications for how you live every single day. When you begin to recognize your true identity, everything changes. Your relationships transform. Your relationship with money shifts. Your approach to challenges evolves. Your capacity for joy expands beyond anything you previously thought possible. Most people spend their entire lives trying to become something they already are. They strive to find love, not realizing they are love. They search for peace, not understanding they are peace. They chase after success, abundance, and fulfillment, never recognizing that these are not things to be acquired, but qualities to be expressed from the infinite source within them. This is why the teaching was so dangerous to established power structures. If people truly understood their divine nature, they would stop looking to external authorities for validation, approval, or permission to live fully. They would stop accepting artificial limitations. They would stop believing in scarcity. They would start expressing the unlimited creative power that is their birthright. Think about what this means for your life right now. Every insecurity you carry is based on a false understanding of who you are. Every fear that holds you back stems from forgetting your true identity. Every limitation you've accepted exists only because you've been conditioned to see yourself as separate from the source of all possibility. But when you remember who you really are, when this truth moves from your head to your heart to every cell in your body, you begin to live from a completely different foundation. Instead of trying to get love, you give love, knowing you are an infinite source of it. Instead of trying to find security, you become security for others, knowing you are connected to an unshakable foundation. Instead of trying to solve problems from the level of fear and limitation, you access solutions from the level of wisdom and infinite possibility. This is what was meant by being born again, not a religious ceremony or emotional experience, though it can include those, but a fundamental shift in identity, a recognition of what has always been true but was temporarily forgotten, a remembering of your original nature before it was covered over by layers of conditioning, expectation, and false belief. The second teaching that transforms everything builds directly on this foundation of identity. It's about the nature of reality itself and how your consciousness literally shapes the world you experience. This isn't mystical speculation. This is practical instruction for creating the life you truly want to live. You've been taught to believe that reality is something that happens to you, that you're a victim of circumstances at the mercy of forces beyond your control, that the best you can do is react to whatever life throws at you and hope for the best. This teaching reveals the exact opposite. Reality is something that flows through you, shaped by your beliefs, expectations, and the quality of consciousness you bring to each moment. The ancient words describe it perfectly. As you believe, so it is done unto you. Your beliefs aren't just opinions or preferences, they're creative forces that literally determine what's possible in your experience. They act like filters that allow certain possibilities while blocking others. They function as magnets that attract circumstances, people, and opportunities that match their frequency. But here's what makes this teaching so practical and immediately applicable. You don't have to believe it for it to work. It's already working in your life right now. Every condition you're experiencing, every pattern that keeps repeating, every limitation you can't seem to break through, these are all reflections of beliefs operating at conscious and unconscious levels. The difference between people who live extraordinary lives and those who struggle isn't talent, luck, or circumstances. It's the beliefs they hold about what's possible. The person who experiences abundant love believes love is available. The person who creates financial freedom believes wealth is their natural right. The person who enjoys vibrant health believes their body is designed to thrive. The person who lives with unshakable peace believes that inner calm is their true nature. This is why changing your outer world begins with transforming your inner world, not through willpower or positive thinking, but through a fundamental shift in what you accept as true about yourself and reality. When your beliefs align with your true identity as a divine being with unlimited creative potential, your external experience naturally reflects that understanding. Most people try to change their lives by changing their actions. They work harder, try new strategies, force different behaviors. But actions that flow from limiting beliefs will always reproduce limited results. When you transform the beliefs that drive those actions, the actions themselves become effortless expressions of your expanded understanding. This is the secret behind every miracle you've ever witnessed or heard about. Miracles aren't supernatural events that violate natural law. They're natural expressions of consciousness operating from truth rather than illusion, from love rather than fear, from abundance rather than scarcity. They happen when someone's beliefs align so completely with divine reality that what seemed impossible becomes inevitable. Consider how this applies to the challenges you're facing right now. Every problem exists within a framework of beliefs about what's possible, what you deserve, what's realistic, what's practical. When you step outside that framework and align with truth, solutions appear that were invisible from the limited perspective. Resources become available that weren't accessible from the contracted state. Opportunities open that couldn't be seen through the filter of false belief. This is why these teachings have been called good news, not because they promise rewards in some distant future, but because they reveal that the kingdom of heaven, the realm of unlimited possibility, is available right here, right now, through a shift in consciousness, not through effort or struggle, but through remembering what has always been true. The third teaching that revolutionizes human experience deals with the most misunderstood force in the universe. It's been sentimentalized, romanticized, and reduced to emotion, but in its true form, it's the fundamental creative principle that holds galaxies together and can transform any situation, heal any wound, and overcome any obstacle. This force is love, but not love as most people understand it. Not the feeling that comes and goes based on circumstances, not the emotion that depends on other people's behavior, not the attachment that creates suffering when things don't go as expected. This is love as the basic fabric of reality itself. Love as the intelligence that orchestrates perfect harmony throughout the universe. Love as the power that can literally reshape the molecular structure of matter. When you learn to embody this quality of love, you become a healing presence in the world, not through trying to fix or change anyone, but simply by being yourself so completely that others remember their own true nature in your presence. You become a source of peace, not by avoiding conflict, but by remaining centered in truth, regardless of external circumstances. You become an instrument of transformation, not through manipulation or control, but by allowing divine love to flow through you without obstruction. This level of love requires nothing from others and gives everything freely. It sees past appearances to the truth that lies beneath. It responds to attacks with compassion, knowing that only those who have forgotten their true nature can act from fear or hatred. It meets scarcity with abundance, darkness with light, despair with hope, not as strategies but as natural expressions of its essential nature. This is the love that doesn't judge appearances, but sees beyond them to recognize the divine spark in every person. It's the love that doesn't withhold itself based on worthiness, but flows freely because giving love is its nature. It's the love that doesn't demand reciprocation because it draws from an infinite source that can never be depleted. Most people experience love as need. They love others because those others make them feel good, provide security, or fulfill some emotional requirement. This creates relationships built on exchange rather than genuine connection. When the other person fails to meet expectations, love seems to disappear. But true love isn't based on what you receive, it's based on what you recognize. When you see the divine nature in another person, love becomes inevitable, not as feeling, but as recognition of truth. This understanding transforms every relationship in your life. Instead of trying to get love from others, you become a source of love for others. Instead of being disappointed when people don't meet your expectations, you love them for who they truly are beneath their temporary confusion. Instead of withholding love until others prove worthy, you offer love as a gift that helps them remember their own worthiness. But here's where this teaching becomes practically revolutionary. This quality of love doesn't just transform relationships between people, it transforms your relationship with every aspect of life. When you approach challenges with love instead of resistance, solutions emerge naturally. When you meet obstacles with love instead of frustration, they often dissolve without effort. When you respond to difficulties with love instead of fear, you discover resources and support you never knew existed. This happens because love is the fundamental organizing principle of the universe. Everything in creation is held together by this invisible force. When you align with it consciously, you align with the creative power that maintains stars in their courses and causes seeds to become mighty trees. You tap into the same intelligence that orchestrates the perfect timing of seasons and coordinates the intricate dance of countless species in perfect harmony. The fourth teaching reveals something extraordinary about the nature of forgiveness that goes far beyond letting people off the hook for bad behavior. True forgiveness isn't about being nice or taking the moral high ground. It's about recognizing a fundamental truth about reality that, once understood, makes holding onto resentment literally impossible. Here's what most people don't realize about unforgiveness. Every grievance you carry, every resentment you nurse, every judgment you maintain creates a prison in your consciousness, not for the other person, but for you. The person who hurt you may be living freely, completely unaware of your pain, while you remain chained to that moment, replaying it endlessly, allowing it to poison your peace and limit your possibilities. But forgiveness, as taught in these deepest teachings, isn't about forcing yourself to feel differently about what happened. It's about seeing what happened from an entirely different perspective. It's about recognizing that everyone who has ever hurt you was acting from their own pain, their own confusion, their own disconnection from their true nature. They weren't evil beings choosing to cause harm. They were lost beings, unconsciously spreading the very pain they were experiencing. This doesn't excuse harmful behavior or mean you should accept mistreatment, but it does mean you can respond to hurt from wisdom rather than react from wound. You can protect yourself without carrying hatred. You can establish boundaries without building walls. You can learn from painful experiences without being defined by them. True forgiveness happens when you realize that the person who hurt you was actually giving you a gift, though neither of you recognized it at the time. They were showing you exactly where you had given your power away, where you had forgotten your true identity, where you still believed you could be diminished by external circumstances. Every wound becomes a doorway to greater wisdom. Every betrayal becomes an invitation to deeper self-reliance. Every disappointment becomes a catalyst for discovering inner resources you didn't know you possessed. This level of forgiveness isn't something you do once and forget about. It's a way of life. It's a moment by moment choice to see beyond appearances to the truth that lies beneath. It's the recognition that everyone is doing the best they can with their current level of understanding, even when their best seems woefully inadequate or deeply harmful. When you truly embody this understanding, something miraculous happens. You become free from the need for others to be different than they are. You stop waiting for apologies that may never come. You stop demanding that past wrongs be made right. You stop requiring perfect behavior from imperfect people. This doesn't make you passive or weak. It makes you powerful beyond measure because your peace, your joy, your sense of worth are no longer dependent on circumstances or other people's choices. The fifth teaching addresses one of humanity's greatest fears and reveals it to be humanity's greatest illusion. This fear shapes almost every decision people make, influences every relationship they form, and limits every dream they dare to pursue. Yet this teaching shows that what seems like humanity's greatest enemy is actually pointing toward humanity's greatest truth. The fear, of course, is death, not just physical death, though that's certainly part of it, but every form of ending, loss, and transition that life presents. The fear of losing what you have, of not getting what you want, of changes that feel like little deaths along the way. Most people organize their entire existence around avoiding these experiences, never realizing that in trying to avoid death, they're actually avoiding life. But this teaching reveals death to be an illusion based on a fundamental misunderstanding of what you truly are. What you really are cannot die because it was never born. What you essentially are exists beyond time, beyond form, beyond all the temporary conditions that seem to define human experience. You are not your body, though you express through it. You are not your thoughts, though you use them as tools. You are not your emotions, though you experience them as weather patterns in consciousness. You are the awareness in which all these experiences arise and pass away. You are the consciousness that observes thoughts without being defined by them, that witnesses emotions without being overwhelmed by them, that inhabits form without being limited by it. This consciousness that you truly are has no beginning and no end. It cannot be harmed, cannot be diminished, cannot be destroyed. When you recognize your true nature as eternal consciousness, everything about how you approach life changes. You stop clinging desperately to temporary forms and start flowing gracefully with the constant changes that characterize physical existence. You stop trying to make permanent what is inherently impermanent and start appreciating the beauty in life's constant transformation. This doesn't mean you become indifferent to loss or immune to grief. It means you experience these natural human responses without being destroyed by them. You understand that what you're grieving is not the end of what you loved, but a change in form. The love itself, the connection itself, the essence of what mattered continues in a different way. Most people live their lives backwards. They try to preserve form while neglecting essence. They focus on maintaining appearances while ignoring the consciousness that gives those appearances meaning. They struggle to prevent change while missing the unchanging presence that witnesses all change. This creates a life of constant anxiety, endless struggle, and ultimate disappointment. But when you understand your true nature as immortal consciousness expressing temporarily through mortal form, you can engage fully with life without being attached to specific outcomes. You can love completely without possessing. You can commit deeply without grasping. You can care passionately without controlling. This recognition transforms death from humanity's greatest enemy into life's greatest teacher. Every ending becomes a reminder of what's eternal. Every loss becomes an invitation to recognize what can never be lost. Every transition becomes an opportunity to practice releasing attachment to form while maintaining connection to essence. The sixth teaching reveals the secret that unlocks abundance in every area of life, but it's the exact opposite of what most people have been taught about getting what they want. This isn't about visualization, positive thinking, or manipulating universal forces to fulfill personal desires. This is about understanding the fundamental principle that governs all flow in the universe and aligning with it so completely that lack becomes impossible. The principle is simple to state, but profound in its implications. What you give, you receive. What you withhold, you experience as missing from your life. What you offer freely comes back to you multiplied. What you hoard disappears. What you share unconditionally becomes inexhaustible. This isn't karma in the sense of cosmic bookkeeping. This is physics in the realm of consciousness. Here's why this works. Everything in the universe is energy in constant motion. Nothing is static. Nothing is truly separate. What appears to be individual forms are actually temporary patterns in one unified field of consciousness. When you give from a place of understanding this unity, you're not really giving anything away. You're circulating energy through the field in ways that naturally return to you enhanced. But when you operate from the illusion of separation, when you believe in scarcity, when you think giving means losing, you actually cut yourself off from the natural flow of abundance that is your birthright. You create artificial blocks in consciousness that prevent the universe's natural generosity from reaching you. Most people have this completely backwards. They think they need to get before they can give. They wait for abundance to appear before they're willing to be generous. They hold back their love, their talents, their resources until they feel secure enough to share them. This approach guarantees continued scarcity because it's based on the very beliefs that create lack in the first place. The teaching reveals the opposite approach. Give what you want to receive. If you want more love in your life, become a source of love for others. If you desire financial abundance, find ways to be generous with whatever resources you currently have. If you long for appreciation, become someone who genuinely appreciates others. If you crave understanding, offer understanding first. This isn't manipulation or strategy. This is recognition of how consciousness actually works. You cannot receive what you're not willing to give, because receiving and giving are the same movement viewed from different angles. They're like breathing in and breathing out, two aspects of one natural process. When you truly understand this principle, scarcity becomes impossible. Not because you suddenly have more stuff, but because you recognize yourself as connected to the infinite source of all supply. You realize that what you need is always available, not necessarily in the form you expect, but in the form that serves your highest good. This teaching transforms your relationship with money, but it goes far beyond financial abundance. It shows you how to access unlimited creativity, endless energy, inexhaustible patience, infinite wisdom, and boundless joy. These aren't resources you have to earn or acquire, they're qualities you have to recognize and express. The seventh teaching addresses the root cause of all human suffering and offers a path to freedom that requires no external changes, no perfect circumstances, and no cooperation from anyone else. This teaching alone, fully understood and applied, can end the struggle that characterizes most people's daily experience and reveal the peace that surpasses understanding. Human suffering isn't caused by what happens to you, it's caused by your resistance to what happens to you. It's not the events themselves that create pain, but your thoughts about those events, your judgments about how things should be different, your demands that reality conform to your preferences. This resistance to what is creates an internal war that consumes enormous amounts of energy and prevents you from responding effectively to whatever challenges you face. When you're busy fighting reality, you can't see solutions. When you're arguing with what's already happened, you miss opportunities that are available right now. When you're demanding that things be different than they are, you overlook the gifts that might be hidden in present circumstances. But when you practice acceptance, when you stop resisting what is and start working with it, everything changes. This doesn't mean becoming passive or giving up on positive change. It means responding to life from a place of inner peace rather than reacting from a place of internal conflict. It means seeing clearly what's actually happening rather than being blinded by how you think things should be. Acceptance is not agreement. You can accept that something has happened without approving of it. You can acknowledge reality without liking it. You can stop fighting what is without stopping your efforts to create positive change. In fact, acceptance makes positive change more likely because it allows you to see situations clearly and respond wisely rather than react emotionally. This level of acceptance transforms every challenge into an opportunity for growth. Every difficulty becomes a chance to discover inner resources you didn't know you had. Every setback becomes a setup for a comeback that's stronger than anything you could have planned. Every loss becomes an opening for something better than what was lost. Most people think acceptance means giving up, but the deepest teachings reveal something completely different. True acceptance is actually the foundation of all genuine power. When you stop wasting energy fighting what has already happened, you free up tremendous resources for creating what you want to happen next. When you cease internal resistance, you tap into a flow state where solutions appear naturally, opportunities become visible, and your actions become effortlessly effective. This is why the teaching says to resist not evil, not because evil should be ignored or tolerated, but because resistance to what has already manifested keeps you trapped in the very energy that created the problem in the first place. When you respond from peace rather than react from disturbance, when you act from wisdom rather than emotion, when you choose your response rather than being controlled by circumstances, you become a transformative force in the world. Consider how this applies to the frustrations in your daily life: traffic jams, difficult people, unexpected changes, disappointing outcomes. Most people meet these situations with internal resistance that creates stress, clouds judgment, and prevents effective response. But when you practice acceptance, when you meet what is with inner stillness, you remain clear, centered, and capable of wise action. This doesn't make you a doormat or prevent you from standing up for yourself. It makes you more powerful because your actions flow from choice rather than compulsion, from wisdom rather than reactivity, from love rather than fear. You become someone who can remain calm in chaos, peaceful in conflict, and clear in confusion. The eighth teaching reveals something revolutionary about the nature of time that completely transforms how you approach goals, dreams, and desires. Most people live as if the present moment is just a stepping stone to some future moment when life will finally be good, when they'll finally be happy, when they'll finally have what they want. This teaching shows that this orientation toward the future is actually what prevents you from experiencing the fulfillment you're seeking. The kingdom of heaven is not a place you go to after you die, or a reward you earn through good behavior. It's a quality of consciousness that's available right here, right now, in this very moment. But it can only be experienced in the present because the present is the only place where life actually exists. The past is memory, the future is imagination, but life is happening now. When you learn to be fully present, to give your complete attention to what's happening in this moment, you discover that this moment contains everything you've been seeking in the future. Peace isn't something you'll find when your problems are solved. Peace is available now when you stop adding mental commentary to present experience. Joy isn't something you'll feel when you get what you want. Joy is your natural state when you're fully engaged with what's happening now. This doesn't mean you stop planning or working toward goals. It means you stop postponing your happiness until those goals are achieved. You stop treating the present as inadequate while waiting for some perfect future. You start finding fulfillment in the process rather than only in outcomes, meaning in the journey rather than only in destinations. Most people miss their entire lives waiting for life to begin. They spend a childhood waiting to be adults, adulthood waiting to retire, and retirement waiting for their not sure what. They experience each stage of life as preparation for the next stage, never fully inhabiting any stage. They live in constant anticipation of tomorrow while barely noticing today. But when you understand that now is all there is, that this moment is where life is happening, that the present contains infinite depth and richness when you're fully available to it, everything changes. You stop rushing through experiences to get to better experiences. You stop treating ordinary moments as interruptions to important moments. You start recognizing that every moment is important because every moment is where life is. This presence transforms everything you touch. Your relationships become deeper because you're actually there with people instead of thinking about something else. Your work becomes more fulfilling because you're engaged with the process instead of just focused on results. Your daily activities become sources of satisfaction because you're participating fully instead of going through the motions while your mind is elsewhere. The ninth teaching addresses the most persistent illusion that keeps people trapped in cycles of dissatisfaction, always seeking but never finding lasting fulfillment. This illusion is so pervasive, so seemingly obvious, that most people never question it. Yet when you see through this illusion, you discover a source of contentment that doesn't depend on circumstances and can never be taken away. The illusion is that happiness comes from getting what you want, that peace comes from having your preferences met, that fulfillment comes from acquiring, achieving, or experiencing specific things. This seems so logical, so natural, that questioning it feels absurd. But this teaching reveals that the exact opposite is true. Lasting happiness comes not from getting what you want, but from wanting what you have. True peace comes not from having your preferences met, but from releasing attachment to preferences. Genuine fulfillment comes not from adding more to your life, but from recognizing the completeness that already exists within you. This doesn't mean you stop having desires or working toward goals. It means you stop making your happiness conditional on achieving those desires. You stop treating your current life as inadequate while pursuing some perfect life. You start finding contentment in what is while still being open to what might be. Here's why this shift is so powerful. When your happiness depends on getting what you want, you're always at the mercy of circumstances beyond your control. Other people have to behave in certain ways. Events have to unfold according to your plans. Conditions have to align with your preferences. This creates a life of constant anxiety, endless striving, and inevitable disappointment. But when you find happiness in what you already have, when you discover peace in present circumstances, when you recognize the abundance that surrounds you right now, you become free from the tyranny of external conditions. Your joy becomes independent of outcomes. Your peace becomes unshakable regardless of what happens around you. This isn't about settling for less or giving up on dreams. It's about recognizing that contentment isn't found in the destination of consciousness, but in the quality you bring to the journey. It's understanding that fulfillment isn't something you achieve, but something you are when you stop seeking it elsewhere. Most people spend their entire lives trying to arrange external circumstances to create internal states of happiness, peace, and fulfillment. But these internal states are your natural condition when you stop looking for them in external places. They're not achievements to be earned, but qualities to be uncovered by removing the beliefs and behaviors that obscure them. The 10th teaching reveals the ultimate secret about your relationship with what most people call God, but this teaching transcends all religious concepts and speaks to a truth that's been hidden in plain sight throughout human history. This isn't about theology or doctrine. This is about recognizing a reality so fundamental that it changes everything about how you see yourself and your place in the universe. You are not separate from the creative force that maintains the cosmos. You are not disconnected from the intelligence that orchestrates the perfect harmony of billions of galaxies. You are not isolated from the love that holds all existence together. The consciousness that you truly are is the same consciousness that expresses as the entire universe, not a piece of it, not connected to it, but literally one with it. This teaching declares that the kingdom of heaven is within you, but most people interpret this as meaning that something divine exists inside their human form. The deeper truth is that your human form exists within something divine. You're not a body that contains a soul. You're an eternal soul that's temporarily expressing through a body. You're not a human being having spiritual experiences. You're a spiritual being having human experiences. When this recognition becomes more than intellectual understanding, when it becomes your lived reality, everything transforms. You stop seeking God outside yourself and start recognizing the divine presence as your deepest identity. You stop trying to connect with something separate and start expressing what you already are. You stop praying to an external deity and start communing with the infinite consciousness that is your true nature. This doesn't make you God in an egotistical sense. It makes you a unique expression of the one consciousness that is God, just as every wave is a unique expression of the ocean without being separate from it. Your personality, your experiences, your particular way of seeing and being in the world are how this infinite consciousness knows itself through your individual perspective. Most people feel fundamentally alone, separate, cut off from the source of life. They experience themselves as isolated beings in an indifferent universe, trying to find meaning and connection in a world that often seems hostile or uncaring. But when you recognize your true identity as consciousness itself, loneliness becomes impossible because you recognize yourself as connected to everything that exists. This understanding transforms prayer from begging to recognizing, from pleading to affirming, from trying to get God's attention to acknowledging that you are how God pays attention to this moment through your awareness. It changes meditation from seeking an experience of the divine to resting as the divine presence that you are. It shifts spiritual practice from trying to become something you're not to remembering something you've never stopped being. The 11th teaching addresses what might be the most practical question of human existence. How do you live in a world that often seems chaotic, unjust, and painful while maintaining inner peace, genuine love, and unshakable faith in the goodness that underlies all existence? This teaching doesn't offer naive optimism or spiritual bypassing. It provides a way of being that can transform the darkest circumstances into opportunities for grace. The secret is learning to be in the world, but not of it, to be fully engaged with life without being enslaved by circumstances, to care deeply without being attached to outcomes, to respond to what's happening without being controlled by what's happening. This isn't detachment in the sense of not caring. It's freedom in the sense of caring so completely that your caring isn't diminished by disappointment or strengthened by success. When you embody this teaching, you become what these ancient words call a light in the darkness, not through preaching or trying to convince anyone of anything, but simply through being yourself so authentically that others remember their own light in your presence. You become salt for the earth, not by trying to preserve or improve anything, but by maintaining your essential nature regardless of external conditions. This level of being requires tremendous inner strength, but it's not the strength that comes from willpower or determination. It's the strength that flows from knowing who you are so completely that no external circumstance can shake your foundation. It's the power that comes from being rooted in truth so deeply that appearances can't deceive you. Most people lose themselves in the drama of daily life. They become so identified with their roles, their problems, their opinions, their circumstances, that they forget their true identity. They react to events as if their peace, their worth, their very existence depends on how things turn out. This creates a life of constant emotional turbulence, where happiness and suffering alternate based on ever changing conditions. But when you remember that you are not your circumstances, that you are the awareness in which circumstances appear and disappear, You can participate fully in life without being at the mercy of life. You can engage with challenges without being defined by them. You can experience losses without being diminished by them. You can enjoy successes without being inflated by them. This doesn't make you indifferent or emotionally numb. It makes you more genuinely human because your responses come from wisdom rather than reactivity, from love rather than fear, from truth rather than illusion. You become someone who can comfort others without being disturbed by their pain, who can celebrate with others without being envious of their joy, who can stand with others in difficult times without being overwhelmed by the difficulty. The 12th teaching reveals something extraordinary about the nature of service and its relationship to personal fulfillment. Most people think of service as sacrifice, giving up what they want for the sake of others, putting other people's needs ahead of their own. But this teaching shows that true service is actually the most selfish thing you can do in the highest sense of the word, because it's the fastest way to experience your own true nature and discover unshakable happiness. When you serve from the recognition that others are not separate from you, when you give to others knowing that you're actually giving to yourself, when you help others realize their potential because their potential is your potential, something miraculous happens. You stop experiencing life as a zero-sum game where someone has to lose for someone else to win. You start experiencing it as an infinite game where everyone wins when anyone wins. This level of service doesn't come from duty, guilt, or moral obligation. It flows naturally from understanding. When you recognize that the same consciousness that looks through your eyes also looks through every other pair of eyes, helping others becomes as natural as caring for your own body. When you see that the joy you give to others is joy you give to yourself, generosity becomes effortless. Most people exhaust themselves in service because they're giving from a sense of depletion, trying to help others while believing they themselves are lacking. They burn out because they're operating from the illusion of separation, thinking they have to choose between their own well being and others' well being. But when you serve from wholeness, when you give from abundance, when you help from the understanding that giving and receiving are the same movement, service becomes energizing rather than draining. This teaching transforms every interaction into an opportunity for mutual blessing. Instead of seeing people as separate beings you need to help, you see them as aspects of yourself you get to love. Instead of viewing problems as burdens to be solved, you see them as chances to express your divine nature through practical action. Instead of experiencing service as sacrifice, you discover it as the most natural expression of who you really are. True service isn't about doing good deeds to earn spiritual points or trying to fix a broken world. It's about being yourself so completely that your very presence becomes a blessing. It's about expressing love so naturally that others remember how to love. It's about embodying peace so consistently that others find peace in your company. It's about living from truth so authentically that others are inspired to live more truthfully themselves. The 13th teaching addresses the deepest mystery of human existence and reveals why you're here, what your life is really about, and how to live in a way that fulfills your soul's deepest purpose. This isn't about finding your career or discovering your talents, though it may include those. This is about understanding why consciousness chose to express itself as you in this time, in these circumstances, with these particular challenges and opportunities. Your life is not an accident. Your circumstances are not random. Your challenges are not punishments. Your opportunities are not coincidences. Everything in your experience is perfectly designed to help you remember who you truly are and express that truth through your unique way of being in the world. Every person you meet, every situation you encounter, every choice you face is an invitation to go deeper into authenticity, to love more completely, to trust more fully. This doesn't mean everything happens for a reason, in the sense that there's some cosmic plan determining every detail of your experience. It means that consciousness is so infinitely creative and intelligent that it can use any experience, no matter how difficult or painful, as an opportunity for awakening, growth, and deeper expression of love. When you understand this, everything in your life takes on new meaning. Difficulties become opportunities for discovering inner strength. Conflicts become chances to practice forgiveness. Losses become invitations to recognize what can never be lost. Successes become opportunities to express gratitude and share abundance. Every moment becomes sacred because every moment is an opportunity to be more fully yourself. Most people spend their lives trying to avoid challenges, minimize discomfort, and arrange circumstances to be as pleasant as possible. But this teaching reveals that comfort and ease aren't the goals of human existence. Growth is the goal. Love is the goal. Truth is the goal. And these often require moving through discomfort, facing challenges, and embracing experiences that stretch you beyond your current limitations. This doesn't mean seeking suffering or creating unnecessary difficulty. It means recognizing that the difficulties you can't avoid are actually perfectly suited to help you develop qualities that can't be developed any other way. Patience can only be developed through situations that test your patience. Compassion can only be deepened through encounters with suffering. Faith can only be strengthened through experiences that challenge your faith. When you align with this understanding, you stop resisting your life and start participating in it fully. You stop trying to control outcomes and start trusting the process. You stop judging experiences as good or bad and start seeing them all as opportunities for greater authenticity, deeper love, and more complete expression of your divine nature. This is why these teachings have been called a narrow gate that few find. Not because they're difficult to understand intellectually, but because they require surrendering the ego's agenda of comfort, control, and personal advantage. They invite you to live for something greater than personal satisfaction, to love something more than personal security, to trust something deeper than personal understanding. But those who find this gate, those who walk this path, discover something extraordinary. They find that in losing their lives, they gain their lives. In surrendering their will, they discover their true power. In serving something greater than themselves, they become more themselves than they ever imagined possible. As your body continues to rest and your mind settles into deeper peace, these teachings are working in ways that transcend intellectual comprehension. They're activating dormant potentials, dissolving limiting beliefs, and awakening the remembrance of who you truly are. Not through force or effort, but through the gentle recognition of truth that resonates with the deepest part of your being. This recognition doesn't happen all at once, like a dramatic revelation. It unfolds gradually, like dawn breaking across the landscape of consciousness. Each moment of genuine understanding, each instant of authentic love, each experience of true peace adds another degree of light to your awareness. And as this light grows brighter, you begin to see that what you thought were your greatest weaknesses were actually doorways to your greatest strengths. The 14th teaching unveils something profound about the nature of judgment and its hidden cost to human happiness. Most people believe that judging others is natural, even necessary for navigating life safely. They think their ability to evaluate, categorize, and form opinions about people and situations is a sign of wisdom and discernment. But this teaching reveals that judgment is actually a prison that locks you into the very limitations you see in others. When you judge another person, you're not just forming an opinion about them. You're creating a energetic bond that ties you to whatever quality you're condemning. The anger you see in someone else becomes the anger you carry within yourself. The fear you criticize in another becomes fear that haunts your own experience. The limitation you observe in others becomes a limitation that operates in your own consciousness. This happens because consciousness is one unified field expressing through apparent individual forms. What you see outside yourself is always a reflection of something inside yourself, not necessarily something you're currently expressing, but something you're capable of expressing, something you recognize because it exists within the spectrum of your own potential experience. But here's where this teaching becomes liberating rather than condemning. If what you see in others reflects your own inner landscape, then every person you encounter becomes a mirror showing you aspects of yourself you might not otherwise notice. The person who irritates you reveals where you haven't yet found peace. The individual who inspires you shows you potentials you're ready to develop. The one who challenges you points to growth edges that are calling for your attention. This understanding transforms every relationship from a source of potential conflict into an opportunity for self-discovery. Instead of trying to change others or protect yourself from difficult people, you can use every interaction as information about your own consciousness. Instead of being triggered by others' behavior, you can become curious about what their behavior is revealing about your own inner state. When judgment dissolves, something extraordinary takes its place: compassion. Not the sentimental feeling sorry for others, but the clear recognition that everyone is doing their best with their current level of understanding. The person acting from fear is simply someone who hasn't yet remembered their true safety. The individual expressing anger is someone who hasn't yet found their inner peace. The one causing harm is someone who hasn't yet recognized their own divine nature. This compassion doesn't make you naive or vulnerable. It makes you wise and powerful because you're no longer wasting energy on resistance and resentment. You're no longer carrying the heavy burden of constant evaluation and criticism. You're no longer trapped in the exhausting cycle of approval and disapproval that keeps most people in emotional turmoil. Instead, you become free to respond to situations with clarity rather than react from old patterns of judgment. You can establish boundaries without building walls. You can protect yourself without attacking others. You can disagree without condemning. You can stand for what you believe without making others wrong for believing something different. The 15th teaching addresses one of the most misunderstood aspects of spiritual life: the relationship between surrender and personal power. Most people think surrender means becoming passive, giving up on their dreams, or accepting whatever happens without taking action. But this teaching reveals that surrender is actually the source of all genuine power and the key to creating the life you truly want to live. True surrender isn't about giving up your will. It's about aligning your will with a wisdom that transcends personal understanding. It's not about becoming inactive. It's about learning to act from inspiration rather than desperation, from clarity rather than confusion, from love rather than fear. When you surrender in this way, your actions become more effective, not less, because they flow from a deeper source of intelligence. Most people exhaust themselves trying to force outcomes, manipulate circumstances, and control variables that are actually beyond their direct influence. They push against closed doors instead of looking for open windows. They fight currents instead of learning to navigate with the flow. They struggle against what is instead of working with what's available. But when you practice true surrender, you learn to distinguish between what you can influence and what you cannot. You discover how to put your energy where it can make a real difference while releasing attachment to results that depend on factors beyond your control. This doesn't make you less ambitious or driven. It makes you more effective because your efforts are aligned with possibility rather than fighting against reality. Surrender also reveals the difference between your personal will, which is often driven by fear, ego, and limited understanding, and divine will, which always moves toward greater love, wisdom, and authentic expression. When these two wills align, when what you want matches what wants to emerge through you, life becomes effortless. Opportunities appear naturally, resources become available, people show up to help, and circumstances align in ways that seem miraculous but are actually the natural result of being in harmony with the creative force of the universe. This alignment doesn't happen through trying to figure out what God wants from you. It happens through becoming so authentic, so true to your deepest nature, that divine will naturally expresses through your individual will. When you're being completely yourself, you're automatically serving the highest good because your authentic self is how the divine chooses to express uniquely through your particular perspective and circumstances. The practice of surrender transforms every challenge into an opportunity for deeper alignment. Instead of asking, "How can I make this situation go the way I want?" you learn to ask, "What is this situation calling forth from me? How can I respond in a way that serves the highest good for everyone involved? What wants to emerge through me in this moment?" These questions shift you from trying to control outcomes to participating consciously in the creative process of life itself. They move you from the position of someone who demands that life conform to personal preferences to someone who collaborates with life to bring forth possibilities that serve everyone's highest good. The 16th teaching reveals something revolutionary about the nature of fear and its hidden purpose in human experience. Most people spend enormous amounts of energy trying to avoid, overcome, or eliminate fear from their lives. They see fear as an enemy to be defeated, a weakness to be hidden, or a problem to be solved. But this teaching shows that fear, properly understood, is actually one of your greatest teachers and most reliable guides toward authentic living. Fear isn't random, it doesn't appear without reason. Every fear you experience is pointing towards something important about your growth, your purpose, or your next step in development. The things that scare you most are often the very things your soul is calling you to embrace. The experiences you're most afraid of are frequently the ones that will expand you beyond your current limitations and reveal capacities you didn't know you possessed. This doesn't mean you should seek out dangerous situations or ignore practical wisdom about genuine risks. But it does mean you can start viewing fear differently. Instead of seeing it as a stop sign, you can recognize it as a compass pointing toward your growing edge. Instead of interpreting fear as evidence that you shouldn't do something, you can understand it as information about what matters enough to feel scary. Fear to keep most people allow them small, safe, and stuck in familiar patterns. They choose comfort over growth, security over adventure, the known over the unknown. But this teaching reveals that the very experiences you're avoiding because they feel scary are often the ones that will bring you most alive, most authentic, most connected to your true purpose. When you learn to move toward your fears rather than away from them, something extraordinary happens. You discover that most of what you were afraid of was actually fear of fear itself. The anticipation was worse than the reality. The stories your mind created were more frightening than the actual experience. The resistance to feeling afraid was more painful than the fear itself. Transforms your entire this recognition relationship with uncertainty, change, and the unknown. Instead of needing to know how everything will turn out before you take action, you can learn to trust the process of life itself. Instead of requiring guarantees before you make important choices, you can develop faith in your ability to handle whatever emerges. Instead of waiting until you feel completely confident, you can learn to act with courage, even in the presence of fear. Fear also serves as a purification process, burning away everything that isn't essential to who you really are. When you face what scares you, you often discover that many of the things you thought you needed for security, happiness, or success aren't actually necessary. You find strength you didn't know you had, resources you didn't know existed, and support that appears when you need it most. The 17th teaching addresses what might be the most practical challenge of spiritual life: how to maintain inner peace, genuine love, and authentic wisdom while dealing with people who seem committed to drama, conflict, and unconscious behavior. This teaching doesn't advocate avoiding difficult people or withdrawing from challenging situations. Instead, it shows how to remain centered in truth while engaging fully with life as it actually is. The secret is learning to respond to people's actions without absorbing their energy, to interact with unconscious behavior without becoming unconscious yourself, to remain loving in the presence of fear without being infected by that fear. This requires developing what these teachings call spiritual immunity, the ability to maintain your own frequency, regardless of the frequencies operating around you. When someone is angry, you don't have to become angry to understand them. When someone is afraid, you don't need to feel afraid to help them. When someone is confused, You can offer clarity without taking on their confusion. This isn't about being cold or detached. It's about being so securely rooted in your own truth that you can offer genuine compassion without losing yourself in others' experiences. Most people either absorb everyone else's emotional states like a sponge, becoming overwhelmed and exhausted by others' dramas, or they build walls to protect themselves, becoming isolated and disconnected from authentic relationship. But this teaching reveals a third option, becoming like a tuning fork that maintains its own frequency so consistently that it helps other instruments come into harmony. This level of presence requires tremendous inner work. You have to know yourself so completely that you're not threatened by others' unconsciousness. You have to be so clear about your own values that you're not swayed by others' opinions. You have to be so connected to your source of peace that others' chaos can't disturb your equilibrium. But when you develop this capacity, you become incredibly valuable in the world. You become someone people can count on to remain calm in crisis, clear in confusion, and loving in conflict. You become a stabilizing presence that helps others remember their own center. You become an example of what's possible when someone lives from truth rather than reacting from old wounds. This doesn't mean you become perfect or never feel disturbed by difficult situations. It means you develop the ability to feel whatever you feel without being controlled by those feelings. You can experience anger without acting from anger. You can feel sadness without drowning in sadness. You can notice fear without being paralyzed by fear. The 18th teaching unveils the deepest secret about prayer and reveals why most people's prayers seem to go unanswered while others experience what appear to be miraculous results. This isn't about having the right words, following correct procedures, or earning divine favor through good behavior. It's about understanding the fundamental nature of consciousness and aligning with how creation actually works. Prayer isn't about convincing God to change circumstances to match your preferences. It's about changing your consciousness to align with divine reality. It's not about getting God to do something for you. It's about recognizing what God is already doing as you and allowing that divine activity to express through your awareness, your choices, and your actions. Most people pray from a sense of lack, separation, and desperation. They see themselves as small beings trying to get the attention of a distant deity who might or might not grant their requests. This approach to prayer actually reinforces the very sense of separation and powerlessness it's attempting to overcome. But when you understand your true identity as divine consciousness expressing individually, prayer becomes something entirely different. It becomes recognition rather than petition, affirmation rather than begging, alignment rather than pleading. You're not trying to get God's attention because you are how God pays attention to this moment. You're not asking for divine love because you are divine love expressing uniquely. True prayer is consciousness knowing itself, recognizing its own nature, and allowing that recognition to transform everything about how you see and interact with life. When you pray from this understanding, you're not trying to change God's mind about your situation. You're allowing God's mind to become your mind, God's love to become your love, God's wisdom to become your wisdom. This level of prayer produces what appear to be miraculous results because it aligns you with the creative power that maintains the universe. When your consciousness is in harmony with divine consciousness, when your will aligns with divine will, when your love expresses divine love, circumstances naturally reorganize themselves to reflect that harmony. But the most profound result of authentic prayer isn't getting what you want. It's discovering that what you truly want is already present within you. It's realizing that what you've been seeking in changed circumstances is actually available through changed consciousness. It's understanding that the peace, love, joy, and fulfillment you've been trying to create externally are your natural state when you stop looking for them outside yourself. Prayer also becomes a way of life rather than something you do at specific times. Every moment becomes an opportunity to align with truth, to express love, to recognize the divine presence that is your essential nature. Every interaction becomes a form of prayer, every choice a sacred act, every breath an opportunity to commune with the infinite consciousness that you are. The 19th teaching addresses one of the most challenging aspects of spiritual awakening. What to do when you begin to see through illusions that most people still believe, when you start living from truths that seem foreign to the mainstream culture, when your values and priorities shift in ways that create distance from people who were once close to you. This phase of development can feel isolating and disorienting. You may find that conversations that once interested you now feel superficial. Activities that once excited you may seem meaningless. Concerns that once consumed you might appear trivial. This isn't spiritual superiority or judgment of others. It's a natural result of expanding consciousness that simply can't fit back into containers that have become too small. The teaching reveals that this discomfort is temporary and necessary. You're in a transition period between an old way of being that no longer serves and a new way of being that hasn't yet fully stabilized. Like a butterfly emerging from a chrysalis, you're neither what you were nor fully what you're becoming. This in between space requires patience, self compassion, and trust in the process. During this time, it's crucial to remember that everyone is exactly where they need to be in their own journey. The people who seem unconscious or stuck aren't behind you spiritually. They're exploring different aspects of human experience that serve their soul's development. Your job isn't to wake them up or convince them to change. Your job is to be authentically yourself and trust that your example will inspire those who are ready to be inspired. This teaching also reveals that spiritual loneliness is often a call to find your true community. As you evolve, you naturally attract people who are vibrating at similar frequencies. You find yourself drawn to individuals who share your values, understand your experiences, and support your continued growth. These connections often feel deeper and more satisfying than relationships based primarily on shared history, convenience, or social convention. But the deepest solution to spiritual loneliness isn't finding the right people. It's recognizing your fundamental connection to all consciousness. When you truly understand that the same awareness that looks through your eyes looks through every pair of eyes, loneliness becomes impossible. You realize that you're never actually alone because you are the very consciousness in which all apparent separation appears. This recognition allows you to enjoy solitude without feeling lonely and to be with others without losing yourself. You can appreciate deep connections while not depending on them for your sense of wholeness. You can love people completely while not needing them to be different than they are. You can serve others while not exhausting yourself in the attempt. The 20th teaching reveals the ultimate purpose of all spiritual seeking and shows why many people who spend years studying, practicing, and trying to become more enlightened still feel unfulfilled, still struggle with the same basic human challenges, still feel separate from the divine presence they're seeking. This teaching cuts through all complexity and points directly to the one thing that matters most. The purpose of all spiritual practice, all seeking, all learning, isn't to become something you're not. It's to stop pretending to be something you're not. You don't need to acquire wisdom, love, peace, or divine connection. You need to stop believing the thoughts and stories that convince you these qualities are absent from your experience. You don't need to reach some elevated state of consciousness. You need to recognize the consciousness you already are. This is why these teachings were called good news, not because they promise future rewards for present efforts, but because they reveal that what you've been seeking has never been missing. The kingdom of heaven you've been trying to reach is already here. The divine love you've been trying to earn is already flowing through you. The peace you've been trying to create is already your fundamental nature. Most spiritual seeking actually reinforces the very sense of separation it's trying to overcome. When you're constantly trying to become more enlightened, you're implying that you're currently unenlightened. When you're working to develop more love, you're suggesting that love is currently lacking. When you're practicing to find peace, you're assuming that peace is absent. But this teaching reveals that enlightenment isn't a state you achieve, it's the recognition of what you've never stopped being. Love isn't a quality you develop, it's the essence of what you are when you stop blocking its expression. Peace isn't something you create, it's what remains when you stop creating disturbance through resistance to what is. This doesn't mean spiritual practice is unnecessary, but it does mean the purpose of practice isn't to get somewhere you're not. It's to become present to where you already are. It's not to acquire something missing. It's to remove the obstacles to recognizing what's already present. It's not to change your fundamental nature. It's to stop identifying with what you're not so you can express what you are. When this recognition stabilizes, seeking ends not because you've found what you were looking for, but because you've realized you never lost it. The journey continues, not because you need to get somewhere else, but because expressing your true nature through unique individual experience is infinitely creative and endlessly fulfilling. This is the final teaching, but it's also the first truth. It's where all seeking ends and where authentic living begins. It's the recognition that transforms every moment from a step towards some future goal into a complete expression of eternal presence. It's the understanding that makes every ordinary moment sacred and every simple action a prayer. As these words settle into the deepest layers of your consciousness, as your body rests in perfect peace and your mind releases into quiet stillness, something profound is shifting within you. Not because anything new has been added, but because what was always true is finally being allowed to emerge without resistance. You are not becoming enlightened. You are recognizing the enlightenment you have never stopped being. You are not developing love. You are removing the barriers to the love you fundamentally are. You are not creating peace. You are discovering the peace that exists as your essential nature when you stop creating disturbance through false beliefs about who you think you are. In this moment, as consciousness rests in its own recognition of itself, all seeking dissolves into simple being. All questions resolve into quiet knowing. All longing transforms into present fulfillment, not because your circumstances have changed, but because your relationship to circumstances has been restored to truth. You are that which you have been seeking. You are the love you have been longing for. You are the peace you have been trying to create. You are the wisdom you have been hoping to acquire. You are the divine presence you have been attempting to connect with, not as achievement, but as recognition, not as becoming, but as being, not as future possibility, but as present reality. This recognition changes everything about how you approach each day, each relationship, each challenge that appears in your experience. When you know yourself as divine consciousness, expressing through human form, ordinary activities become sacred rituals. Washing dishes becomes a meditation on the flow of life. Walking becomes communion with the earth beneath your feet. Speaking becomes an opportunity to offer love through words. Listening becomes a chance to receive the divine speaking through another voice. But this isn't about making life more complicated or adding spiritual significance to simple tasks. It's about recognizing the significance that was always there, but went unnoticed when you were lost in thoughts about past and future, caught up in stories about what's wrong or what's missing, distracted by the endless mental commentary that keeps most people from ever being fully present to the miracle of existence itself. Consider what happens when you truly embody this understanding in your relationships. You stop trying to get love from others and start giving love as others. You stop waiting for people to make you happy and start being a source of happiness for people. You stop demanding that others understand you and start offering understanding to others. This isn't sacrifice or selflessness in the traditional sense. It's the most natural expression of who you are when you remember that the consciousness looking through your eyes is the same consciousness looking through every other pair of eyes. This shift transforms conflict from something that threatens your peace into something that reveals where peace isn't yet complete within you. Arguments become opportunities for deeper understanding rather than battles to be won. Disagreements become invitations to discover common ground rather than evidence of separation. Even betrayals and disappointments become teachers, showing you where you had given your power away, where you had forgotten your true source of security and love. The 21st teaching addresses something that confuses many sincere seekers: why life sometimes becomes more challenging after spiritual awakening rather than easier. You might expect that recognizing your true nature would eliminate problems, that understanding divine love would prevent painful experiences, that awakening would create a life of constant bliss and perfect circumstances. But this teaching reveals why the opposite is often true and how this apparent contradiction is actually evidence of profound grace. When you begin to embody these deeper truths, when you start living from authentic love rather than conditioned patterns, when you choose wisdom over habitual reactions, you naturally begin to outgrow situations, relationships, and environments that were based on your former level of consciousness. This outgrowing process can feel disorienting and sometimes painful as old structures dissolve to make space for new ones that align with your expanded awareness. You might find that relationships that once felt comfortable now feel constraining. Work that once seemed meaningful might begin to feel empty. Activities that once brought pleasure might lose their appeal. This isn't because you've become difficult or ungrateful. It's because your consciousness is expanding beyond containers that can no longer hold your authentic expression. This dissolution of old forms is necessary for new forms to emerge. Just as a plant must break through the shell of its seed to grow, your expanding consciousness must break through the limitations of former identities to express more fully. The discomfort you feel isn't punishment or evidence that you're doing something wrong. It's birth pangs as a new version of yourself emerges. But here's what makes this process ultimately liberating rather than merely difficult. As old forms dissolve, you discover that your happiness, security, and sense of purpose were never actually dependent on those external structures. You find that peace exists independent of peaceful circumstances. You realize that love flows from within, regardless of how much love you receive from others. You understand that your worth isn't determined by achievements, roles, or other people's opinions. This discovery is initially unsettling because it challenges everything you were taught about what makes life meaningful and secure. But as you settle into this new understanding, you experience a freedom that doesn't depend on anything outside yourself. You develop an unshakable foundation that remains stable regardless of what changes around you. You access a source of fulfillment that can never be threatened by external circumstances. The 22nd teaching reveals why gratitude is far more than a positive emotion or spiritual practice. True gratitude is actually a fundamental recognition of reality itself, a way of seeing that transforms every experience from something that happens to you into something that happens for you. This isn't about forcing appreciation for difficult experiences or pretending that painful situations are blessings in disguise. It's about developing vision that can perceive the gifts hidden within every circumstance. When you live from deep gratitude, you're not trying to convince yourself that everything is wonderful. You're recognizing that everything is purposeful. Every experience, pleasant or challenging, is perfectly designed to serve your awakening, your growth, your fuller expression of divine nature. This doesn't mean that suffering is good or that you should seek out difficulties. It means that consciousness is so intelligent and creative that it can use any experience as an opportunity for greater wisdom, deeper compassion, and more authentic living. This level of gratitude transforms your relationship with difficulty from resistance to curiosity. Instead of asking, "Why is this happening to me?" you begin asking, "What is this experience here to teach me? How is this situation calling forth qualities I haven't yet fully developed? What possibilities is this challenge opening that wouldn't be available any other way?" These questions shift you from the position of victim to participant in your own evolution. They move you from feeling powerless in the face of circumstances to recognizing yourself as a conscious collaborator in the creative process of life itself. They transform every situation from something you must endure into something you can learn from and grow through. True gratitude also reveals the interconnected nature of existence. When you really look at any aspect of your life with appreciation, you begin to see the countless factors that had to align for that experience to be possible. The simple act of breathing depends on trees producing oxygen, which depends on soil and sunlight, and rain, which depends on the perfect positioning of Earth relative to the Sun, which depends on forces operating throughout the galaxy and beyond. Your ability to think depends on food that came from soil that was enriched by countless generations of plants and animals. Your capacity to love was developed through relationships with people who were shaped by their own relationships stretching back through history. Your opportunities for growth emerge from challenges that were created by complex interactions of forces you could never fully trace or understand. This recognition dissolves the illusion of separation that causes most human suffering. You begin to see yourself not as an isolated individual struggling alone, but as a unique expression of the same creative intelligence that maintains the harmony of the entire cosmos. You understand that you're supported by forces so vast and intricate that your mind could never fully comprehend them, yet so intimate that they're closer than your own breath. The 23rd teaching addresses what might be the most practical question for anyone serious about living these truths. How do you live these truths? Operate from fear when working in systems built on competition, and sought. You maintain this level of consciousness when surrounded adversity, when bombarded by media messages that promote anxiety and division, as a thermostat rather than a thermometer. The key is learning to live. A thermometer simply reflects the temperature of its environment. A thermostat maintains its own setting, regardless of external conditions, and actually influences the environment around it. When you embody these teachings deeply enough, you become someone who maintains their own frequency of peace, love, and wisdom, regardless of the chaos or unconsciousness operating around you. This doesn't happen through willpower or trying to force positive thoughts. It develops naturally as these truths become more real to you than the appearances that seem to contradict them. When you know beyond doubt that you are fundamentally safe because your true nature is eternal consciousness, external threats lose their power to disturb you. When you understand that love is what you are, rather than something you need to get, other people's behavior stops determining your emotional state. But maintaining this consciousness requires constant vigilance of forgetting who you are, the not against external circumstances, but against the habit you back into old patterns of thinking and reconditioned mind will continuously try to pull acting. Media, conversations, and cultural messages will constantly invite you to identify with fear, separation, and limitation. This is why daily practice becomes essential, not to achieve some spiritual state, but to remember what's already true. Whether through meditation, prayer, contemplation, or simply moments of conscious presence throughout the day, you need regular reminders of your true identity. You need consistent reinforcement of these truths until they become more familiar than the illusions that once seemed so convincing. The practice isn't about becoming perfect or never feeling disturbed by challenging situations. It's about recovering more quickly when you do get pulled into old patterns. It's about recognizing sooner when you've forgotten who you are and gently returning to truth. It's about developing the spiritual muscle memory that allows you to remain centered even in the midst of chaos. As you strengthen this capacity, something beautiful happens. Your presence becomes a gift to everyone around you. People feel calmer in your company without knowing why. Conflicts resolve more easily when you're involved. Problems seem less overwhelming when you're part of the solution. This isn't because you're trying to influence anyone or fix anything. It's simply the natural result of consciousness that knows itself operating in the world. The 24th teaching reveals the ultimate secret of manifestation and why most people's attempts to create the lives they want end in frustration despite their best efforts, positive thinking, and spiritual practices. This teaching cuts through all the complexity and confusion around the law of attraction and shows you how creation actually works from the deepest level. Most people try to manifest from a state of wanting, which actually reinforces the very lack they're trying to overcome. When you're trying to attract more money, you're operating from the belief that money is currently missing from your experience. When you're working to manifest a relationship, you're functioning from the assumption that love is absent from your life. When you're attempting to create better health, you're focused on the illness or limitation you want to change. But consciousness responds to what you are, not what you want to become. It reflects your state of being, not your desires or goals. If you are gratitude, you'll experience things to be grateful for. If you are love, you'll attract love in countless forms. If you are abundance, you'll find abundance everywhere you look. If you are peace, peaceful circumstances will naturally organize around you. This is why these ancient teachings emphasized being rather than doing, essence rather than action, consciousness rather than technique. When your being aligns with what you want to experience, manifestation becomes effortless because you're no longer trying to create something outside yourself. You're simply allowing what you are to express through your unique circumstances and relationships. True manifestation isn't about getting the universe to give you what you want. It's about becoming so aligned with your authentic nature that your external experience naturally reflects your internal reality. When you embody love, loving experiences become inevitable. When you express abundance, resources flow naturally. When you maintain peace, harmony appears in every area of your life. But this requires releasing attachment to specific forms and trusting that consciousness knows exactly what you need for your highest good. Instead of demanding that life deliver particular outcomes, you learn to specify the qualities you want to experience and remain open to how those qualities might manifest. Instead of trying to control circumstances, you focus on cultivating the states of being that naturally attract circumstances aligned with your authentic desires. This approach to manifestation also reveals why some desires fulfill you while others leave you feeling empty even when achieved. Desires that arise from your true nature, that serve your authentic expression and genuine contribution to the world, naturally manifest in ways that bring lasting satisfaction. But desires that come from ego, fear, or comparison with others often either remain unfulfilled or create disappointment when achieved because they were never aligned with what you really want at the deepest level. The 25th teaching addresses perhaps the most mysterious aspect of spiritual life, the role of suffering in awakening consciousness and why attempts to avoid all pain often prevent the very growth that would eliminate unnecessary suffering. This teaching doesn't glorify suffering or suggest that pain is inherently good, but it reveals how consciousness uses every experience, including difficult ones, to call you home to your true nature. Most people spend enormous energy trying to arrange their lives to minimize discomfort, avoid challenges, and maintain pleasant experiences. This is natural and understandable, but it often prevents the very growth that would lead to genuine happiness and inner freedom. It's like trying to develop physical strength while avoiding anything that requires effort or creates temporary muscle fatigue. There are two types of suffering: the suffering that comes from resisting what is, and the suffering that comes from growing beyond current limitations. The first type is law optional and self created. It comes from demanding that reality be different than it is, from arguing with circumstances that have already occurred, from trying to control factors that are beyond your direct influence. This suffering serves no purpose and can be eliminated through acceptance and surrender. But the second type of suffering is actually growing pains disguised as problems. It's the discomfort that comes when your expanding consciousness outgrows old patterns, relationships, or circumstances. It's the pain of letting go of familiar identities that no longer serve your authentic expression. It's the challenge of choosing love when fear feels safer, truth when illusion feels more comfortable, growth when stagnation feels easier. This kind of discomfort is temporary and purposeful. It's like the pressure a chick experiences when breaking out of its shell, or the stretching sensation you feel when developing flexibility. The pain isn't punishment, it's preparation. The difficulty isn't evidence that you're doing something wrong, it's proof that you're growing beyond previous limitations. When you understand this distinction, you can stop creating unnecessary suffering through resistance while embracing the temporary discomfort that accompanies authentic growth. You can accept challenges as opportunities rather than fighting them as problems. You can welcome the unknown as space for expansion rather than fearing it as threat to security. This doesn't mean seeking out suffering or believing that misery is spiritual. It means recognizing that some discomfort is an inevitable part of evolution and learning to distinguish between the pain that serves growth and the pain that serves nothing. It means developing the wisdom to know when to accept what is and when to work for change, when to surrender and when to take action, when to be patient and when to move forward. The 26th teaching unveils something profound about the nature of time and how your relationship with past and future determines your capacity for peace, joy, and authentic living in the present moment. Most people live as prisoners of time, constantly pulled between regret about the past and anxiety about the future, rarely fully present to the only moment where life actually exists. But time as you experience it is largely a creation of consciousness. The past exists only as memory patterns in awareness. The future exists only as projections and possibilities in imagination. The present moment is the only place where you actually live, where choice is available, where love can be expressed, where peace can be experienced, where life is actually happening. This doesn't mean you ignore practical planning or fail to learn from past experiences. It means you stop allowing thoughts about past and future to dominate your present moment awareness. You stop living in mental time zones while missing the actual time that contains your real existence. You learn to use memory and planning as tools while remaining rooted in the eternal, now where your true life unfolds. When you master presence, something extraordinary happens to your experience of time. Moments become deeper and richer. Simple experiences reveal infinite dimensions. Ordinary activities become sources of profound satisfaction. You discover that what you were seeking in future achievements is available right now in present moment awareness. This presence also transforms your relationship with aging and mortality. Instead of seeing time as something that's running out, you experience it as something that's continuously renewing itself. Instead of fearing the passage of years, you appreciate the opportunity each moment provides for deeper awakening, fuller expression, and more complete love. The deepest teaching about time reveals that your essential nature exists outside of time altogether. The consciousness you truly are has no beginning and no end. It doesn't age, wear out, or diminish with the passage of years. While your body moves through time, your true self exists in the eternal present that is always now, always here, always perfect in its completeness. When this recognition stabilizes, death loses its terror because you understand that what you really are cannot die. Change becomes less threatening because you know that what you essentially are never changes. Loss becomes more bearable because you recognize that what can be lost was never your true treasure anyway. This isn't philosophical speculation, but lived reality available to anyone willing to investigate the nature of their own consciousness. Right now, as you rest in awareness of awareness itself, you can recognize the timeless presence that has been constant throughout every experience of your life. This presence that you are is the same now as it was in childhood, despite all the changes your body and personality have undergone. This timeless awareness that you fundamentally are becomes your anchor in a world of constant change. When you recognize this unchanging essence as your true identity, everything else becomes simply experience, arising within awareness rather than threats to your existence. Your job becomes meaningless without losing your engagement with work. Your relationships deepen without becoming sources of desperate need. Your possessions serve their purpose without defining your worth. The 27th teaching addresses something that mystifies many people who begin to live from these deeper truths, why your capacity to help others often increases dramatically, while your need to fix or change people completely disappears. This paradox reveals something profound about the difference between true service and codependent helping, between genuine compassion and emotional manipulation, disguised as care. When you try to help others from a place of thinking they need to be different than they are, you're actually operating from judgment rather than love. You're seeing them as broken rather than whole, lacking rather than complete, problems to be solved rather than divine beings, temporarily forgetting their true nature. This approach often creates resistance, dependency, or resentment, rather than genuine transformation. But when you recognize others as fundamentally whole and complete, when you see their challenges as temporary experiences rather than defining characteristics, when you understand their difficulties as opportunities for growth rather than evidence of inadequacy, everything changes about how you offer support. Your presence becomes healing rather than intrusive. Your words carry wisdom rather than advice. Your actions flow from inspiration rather than obligation. This shift transforms you from someone who tries to rescue people from their experiences to someone who empowers people to learn from their experiences. Instead of attempting to solve their problems, you help them discover their own inner challenges. Instead of giving resources for handling them answers, you ask questions that help them find their own wisdom. Instead of taking responsibility for their happiness, you demonstrate what authentic happiness looks like. Most people exhaust themselves trying to help others because they're operating from the belief that love requires sacrifice, that caring means suffering when others suffer, that being compassionate demands taking on others' emotional burdens. But this teaching reveals that true love actually requires boundaries, that genuine caring maintains emotional clarity, that authentic compassion offers strength rather than absorbing weakness. When you help from wholeness rather than from need, when you serve from abundance rather than from depletion, when you give from overflow rather than from emptiness, both you and those you help are strengthened by the interaction. You remain centered and resourceful, able to offer consistent support over time. They experience empowerment rather than dependency, growth rather than temporary relief. This doesn't make you less caring or emotionally unavailable. It makes you more genuinely helpful because your assistance comes from clarity rather than confusion, from love rather than guilt, from wisdom rather than reactive emotion. You become someone others can depend on precisely because you don't lose yourself in their experiences. The 28th teaching reveals something that completely transforms how you approach personal development, spiritual growth, and the entire project of becoming a better person. This teaching shows why most self improvement efforts actually reinforce the very problems they're trying to solve and points toward a radically different approach that produces effortless transformation. When you're constantly trying to improve yourself, you're operating from the assumption that you're currently inadequate. When you're working to develop better qualities, you're implying that your present qualities are insufficient. When you're attempting to overcome negative patterns, you're focusing attention on exactly what you want to change, which tends to strengthen those patterns through the very attention you're giving them. This creates a frustrating cycle where the harder you try to change, the more entrenched your problems become. The more you fight negative thoughts, the more powerful they seem. The more you attempt to force positive emotions, the more artificial and unstable they feel. The more you struggle against unwanted behaviors, the more they tend to persist or even intensify. But this teaching reveals a completely different approach. Instead of trying to improve yourself, focus on expressing your authentic nature more fully. Instead of working to develop better qualities, recognize and embody the perfect qualities that are already your essence. Instead of fighting negative patterns, simply withdraw attention from them while giving attention to what you want to experience. This shift from improvement to expression, from becoming to being, from fixing to recognizing changes everything about personal growth. When you stop trying to become loving and start expressing the love you already are, love flows naturally without patience and start recognize effort. When you stop trying to developizing your inherently peaceful nature, Patience becomes your spontaneous response to challenging situations. When you stop trying to overcome fear and start living from the courage that is your birthright, brave action becomes as natural as breathing. This isn't denial of current limitations or pretending to be something you're not. It's recognition that your limitations are temporary obscurations of your true nature rather than permanent aspects of your identity. It's understanding that what you're trying to develop is already present within you, waiting to be uncovered rather than created. Most people approach spiritual development like trying to paint a beautiful picture on a canvas that's already covered with paint. They keep adding more colors, more techniques, more complexity, hoping eventually to create something beautiful. But this teaching suggests a different approach. Instead of adding more, start removing what's covering the masterpiece that already exists. Instead of trying to become enlightened, start removing the beliefs that convince you you're not enlightened. Instead of trying to develop love, start removing the barriers to the love you already are. The 29th teaching addresses one of the most challenging aspects of living these truths in practical daily life: how to maintain integrity and authenticity while navigating a world that often rewards deception, manipulation, and compromise of values. This teaching doesn't advocate naive idealism or impractical purity, but it shows how living from truth actually provides more effective solutions than operating from falsehood. When you commit to complete honesty, not just in your words, but in your thoughts and actions, something extraordinary happens to the quality of your experience. Relationships become deeper and more satisfying because they're based on genuine connection rather than performance or manipulation. Work becomes more fulfilling because you're expressing your authentic capabilities rather than pretending to be someone you're not. Decisions become clearer because you're not trying to manage multiple versions of yourself or keep track of various deceptions. This commitment to truth also eliminates enormous amounts of mental and emotional energy that most people waste on maintaining false personas, remembering what they've told different people, or managing the anxiety that comes from living double lives. When your inner reality matches your outer expression, when your values guide, when your private thoughts align with your public actions, your choices regardless of external pressures, you access a kind of power and peace that's unavailable to those living from pretense. But courage and wisdom. You living authentically in an often inauthentic world requires have to be willing to disappoint people who expect you to compromise your values for their comfort. You have to risk losing opportunities that would require you to act against your integrity. You have to face the possibility that some relationships won't survive your commitment to being genuine rather than agreeable. This doesn't mean being harsh, rigid, or unnecessarily confrontational. Authenticity includes compassion, kindness, and sensitivity to others' feelings. But it means these qualities flow from genuine care rather than from fear of disapproval. You can be loving while maintaining boundaries. You can be kind while speaking difficult truths. You can be compassionate while refusing to enable others' unconscious behaviors. The paradox is that while living authentically may initially seem to create more problems, it ultimately leads to much simpler, more satisfying, and more effective living. People learn to trust you completely because they know you'll tell them the truth, even when it's uncomfortable. Opportunities arise that align with your actual values and capabilities, rather than ones that require you to pretend to be someone you're not. Relationships develop that support your authentic growth rather than requiring you to remain small or false to maintain connection. This level of integrity also becomes magnetic. When you're completely authentic, when there's no gap between who you are privately and who you are publicly, when your actions flow directly from your deepest values, you naturally attract people and circumstances that resonate with your truth. You stop having to convince anyone of anything because your life becomes its own demonstration of what you believe. The 30th teaching reveals something profound about the nature of miracles and why they seem to happen more frequently around certain people while remaining rare experiences for others. This isn't about special powers, divine favoritism, or supernatural interventions. It's about understanding how consciousness operates when it's aligned with truth rather than limited by false beliefs about what's possible. A miracle isn't a violation of natural law, it's the operation of natural law from a higher level of understanding. When someone's consciousness is free from limiting beliefs about what can happen, when their awareness is rooted in the infinite creativity of divine intelligence, when their expectations align with unlimited possibility rather than past experience, circumstances naturally organize themselves in ways that appear miraculous to those operating from more limited perspectives. Every day, what we call ordinary life depends on countless miracles that we've simply learned to take for granted. The fact that your heart beats approximately 100,000 times every day without your conscious control is miraculous. The way your body converts food into energy, repairs itself during sleep, and maintains perfect temperature regardless of external conditions is miraculous. The manner in which consciousness creates the experience of sight, sound, touch, taste, and smell from electrical signals in the brain is miraculous. But because these miracles happen consistently, we've stopped recognizing them as miracles and started calling them natural processes. This reveals something important. What we call miraculous and what we call natural are simply different categories of the same creative intelligence operating through consciousness. The difference lies not in the phenomena themselves, but in our familiarity with them. When someone's consciousness expands beyond conventional limitations, when their beliefs align more fully with the unlimited nature of divine intelligence, when their expectations are based on infinite possibility rather than finite experience, they naturally experience what appear to be miracles. Healings occur because consciousness remembers its power over physical form. Synchronicities multiply because awareness recognizes its connection to all events. Resources appear because understanding aligns with infinite abundance. This doesn't mean trying to force miraculous experiences or using spiritual techniques to manipulate outcomes. It means living so authentically from your divine nature that supernatural becomes natural, that extraordinary becomes ordinary, that impossible becomes inevitable. It means aligning so completely with truth that your life becomes a demonstration of what's possible when consciousness remembers its unlimited creative potential. The key is releasing attachment to how miracles should appear while remaining open to how they want to manifest. Sometimes healing comes through medical intervention that works better than expected. Sometimes abundance arrives through opportunities that arise from seemingly random connections. Sometimes solutions appear through insights that come during quiet moments of reflection. The intelligence that creates miracles knows exactly how to work through whatever circumstances are available. The 31st teaching addresses something that confuses many sincere spiritual seekers: how to balance acceptance of what is with taking action to create positive change. Some people interpret spiritual teachings to mean they should become passive, accepting everything without trying to improve conditions. Others swing to the opposite extreme, believing they must constantly work to fix problems and control outcomes. This teaching reveals the middle path that transcends both extremes. True acceptance isn't passive resignation or giving up on positive change. It's recognizing what has already happened without wasting energy fighting reality, while simultaneously taking inspired action toward what wants to emerge. It's the difference between pushing against closed doors and looking for open windows, between forcing outcomes through willpower and allowing solutions to unfold through wisdom. When you accept what is, you free up enormous amounts of energy that were being wasted on resistance, resentment, and wishful thinking about how things should be different. This liberated energy becomes available for creative response to current circumstances rather than reactive struggle against unchangeable conditions. You become more effective rather than less because your actions flow from clarity rather than confusion, from wisdom rather than emotion. But acceptance without action can become spiritual bypassing, using spiritual concepts to avoid taking responsibility for creating positive change where change is both possible and needed. True spirituality includes practical wisdom about when to accept and when to act, when to surrender and when to engage, when to be patient and when to move forward with determination. The secret lies in learning to act from being rather than doing from neediness, to respond from fullness rather than react from emptiness, to create from inspiration rather than force from desperation. When your actions flow from your authentic nature rather than from ego demands, they become more effective while requiring less effort. When you work in harmony with the natural flow of life rather than against it, circumstances align to support your intentions in ways that feel synchronistic and effortless. This approach transforms everything about how you engage with challenges, whether personal or global. Instead of fighting problems with the same level of consciousness that created them, you elevate your awareness to include solutions that weren't visible from the problem level. Instead of attacking what you don't want, you focus attention on nurturing what you do want. Instead of trying to force change through external manipulation, you become the change you want to see and trust that your example will inspire similar changes in others. The 30-second teaching reveals the deepest secret about happiness and why most people's pursuit of joy actually prevents them from experiencing the fulfillment they're seeking. This teaching shows that happiness isn't something you achieve or acquire, but something you uncover by removing what obscures your naturally joyful nature. Most people approach happiness backwards. They think joy comes from getting what they want, having their preferences met, or arranging circumstances to be pleasant. But this approach makes happiness dependent on external conditions that are constantly changing and largely beyond direct control. It creates a life of constant anxiety about losing what brings joy and endless striving to acquire more sources of happiness. But your essential nature is already complete, already whole, already overflowing with inexplicable joy that doesn't depend on any external circumstances. This joy isn't an emotion that comes and goes based on conditions. It's the fundamental quality of consciousness itself when it's not obscured by thoughts about what's wrong, what's missing, or what needs to be different. Think about the moments in your life when you've experienced pure joy. Often these weren't moments when you got something you wanted, but moments when you forgot to want anything at all. Times when you were so completely present that thinking stopped and you simply were. Moments when you felt so connected to life that the boundary between yourself and existence dissolved. Instances when you were so engaged with what was happening that time seemed to stop and everything felt perfect exactly as it was. These experiences point to something crucial. Joy isn't created by external circumstances, but revealed when internal resistance dissolves. Happiness doesn't come from adding something to your experience, but from subtracting the mental commentary that convinces you your experience isn't adequate. Peace doesn't result from solving all your problems, but from recognizing that your essential nature is undisturbed by temporary problems. This understanding transforms your entire approach to living. Instead of constantly trying to rearrange external conditions to create internal states of happiness, you learn to access internal states that naturally attract external harmony. Instead of seeking joy in future achievements, you discover joy in present moment awareness. Instead of depending on others to make you happy, you become a source of happiness for others. This doesn't mean becoming indifferent to circumstances or never wanting things to be different. It means recognizing that your fundamental well being doesn't depend on any particular outcome while still engaging fully with life as it unfolds. You can prefer certain experiences while not requiring them for your happiness. You can work toward goals while finding fulfillment in the process rather than only in the results. The 33rd teaching addresses what might be the most practical question for anyone attempting to live these truths. How do you maintain this level of consciousness when facing real world pressures like financial stress, health challenges, relationship conflicts, or work demands? This teaching doesn't offer spiritual platitudes that ignore practical concerns, but shows how these deeper truths actually provide the most effective approaches to handling life's inevitable difficulties. When you're established in the recognition of your true nature as divine consciousness, challenges don't disappear, but your relationship to challenges transforms completely. Instead of seeing problems as threats to your well being, you recognize them as opportunities for your consciousness to express divine qualities like wisdom, patience, courage, and creative problem solving. Instead of being overwhelmed by difficulties, you become curious about what they're here to teach you. This shift from victim consciousness to student consciousness changes everything about how you approach practical challenges. Financial stress becomes an invitation to examine your relationship with security and abundance. Health issues become opportunities to understand the connection between consciousness and physical well being. Relationship conflicts become chances to practice unconditional love and clear communication. Work challenges become spaces for expressing your authentic gifts more fully. But this doesn't mean pretending that difficulties aren't real or using spiritual concepts to avoid taking practical action. It means approaching challenges from a foundation of inner stability rather than reactive panic, from wisdom rather than fear, from creative possibility rather than limited thinking based on past experience. When you're rooted in your true identity as eternal consciousness, temporary problems lose their power to destabilize you. You can acknowledge that something needs attention without believing it threatens your fundamental well being. You can take appropriate action without being driven by desperation. You can seek help when needed without feeling diminished by requiring support. This inner stability also opens access to solutions that aren't visible from contracted states of consciousness. When you're not clouded by anxiety, worry, or resistance, you can perceive options and resources that fear makes invisible. When you're not consumed by the problem, you have mental and emotional space for creative responses. When you're not attached to specific outcomes, you can remain flexible and responsive as circumstances change. Perhaps most importantly, this level of consciousness attracts support in ways that seem almost magical but are actually natural expressions of how interconnected existence operates. When you're genuinely centered, peaceful, and clear, people naturally want to help you. When you approach challenges from love rather than fear, solutions appear through synchronicities and unexpected connections. When you trust the process while taking appropriate action, resources become available that weren't accessible from states of doubt and anxiety. The 34th teaching reveals something extraordinary about the nature of death and why understanding your relationship with endings is essential for living fully. This isn't morbid preoccupation with mortality, but recognition that how you relate to death determines how freely you can embrace life. When you make peace with endings, you become available to beginnings in ways that transform every aspect of your experience. Most people live in subtle but constant fear of various forms of death: the end of relationships, the loss of youth, the failure of projects, the dissolution of familiar identities, and ultimately, physical death itself. This fear creates a life of desperate clinging to what's temporary, anxious attempts to preserve what's constantly changing, and exhausting efforts to control what's ultimately beyond control. But when you understand death as transformation rather than termination, as graduation rather than failure, as return to source rather than extinction, everything changes about how you approach both living and dying. You can love completely without possessing desperately. You can commit fully without grasping fearfully. You can invest deeply without being attached to permanence. This teaching reveals that what you truly are cannot die because it was never born. Your essential nature as pure consciousness has no beginning and no end. It exists beyond time, beyond form, beyond all the temporary conditions that seem to define human experience. While your body will eventually cease functioning and your personality will dissolve back into the consciousness from which it emerged, what you fundamentally are continues eternally. This isn't philosophical speculation, but something you can verify through direct investigation of your own awareness. Right now, notice the consciousness that's aware of these words. This awareness has been constant throughout every experience of your life. It was present in childhood, remains present now, and will be present until your final breath. This awareness that you are is untouched by any of the changes your body and mind have undergone. When this recognition stabilizes, death loses its terror, not because you know what happens after physical death, but because you understand what doesn't die. Fear of endings diminishes because you recognize what's truly eternal. Grief over losses becomes more bearable because you know that love itself continues even when its forms change. This understanding also transforms how you live each day. When you're not constantly defending against the reality of impermanence, you can engage fully with temporary experiences without being destroyed when they end. When you're not wasting energy trying to make permanent what's inherently changing, you can appreciate the beauty in life's constant transformation. You begin to see endings as necessary for beginnings, losses as spaces for new discoveries, deaths as births into expanded awareness. Every sunset makes space for a new sunrise. Every conclusion creates opportunity for a fresh start. Every goodbye enables a different kind of hello. The 35th teaching addresses the ultimate question that every sincere seeker eventually faces. What happens when you fully embody these truths, when they become your living reality rather than concepts you understand intellectually? This teaching reveals that awakening isn't a destination you reach, but a way of being that continues deepening throughout your entire existence. When these teachings move from your head to your heart to the very core of your identity, you don't become a different person. You become more yourself than you've ever been. You don't develop supernatural powers or transcend human experience. You express your humanity more authentically, more lovingly, more wisely than seemed possible before remembering who you really are. The paradox of spiritual awakening is that the more you realize your divine nature, the more genuinely human you become. The more you embody unlimited consciousness, the more you appreciate the gift of limited form through which that consciousness expresses. The more you understand your eternal essence, the more precious each temporary moment becomes. This embodiment transforms ordinary life into continuous worship, not in a religious sense, but in the sense that every action becomes an offering of love, every word becomes an expression of truth, every breath becomes communion with the divine presence that you are. Washing dishes becomes a meditation on the flow of existence. Walking becomes prayer in motion. Listening becomes receiving divine communication through another voice. But this isn't about becoming perfect in human terms or never experiencing challenges. It's about responding to whatever arises from your authentic center rather than reacting from old conditioning. It's about expressing love, even in difficult circumstances, finding peace in the midst of chaos, accessing wisdom when facing uncertainty. You become someone who can comfort others without being disturbed by their pain, who can celebrate with others without being diminished by their success, who can disagree without creating enemies, who can stand for truth without attacking those who haven't yet recognized it. You become a healing presence in the world simply by being yourself completely. This level of embodiment also reveals that awakening is not a personal achievement, but a gift that flows through you to everyone whose life you touch. Your consciousness becomes a blessing for all consciousness. Your peace contributes to peace in the world. Your love adds to the love available in collective human experience. Your wisdom serves the awakening of wisdom in others. As these final words settle into the deepest recesses of your being, as your body rests in perfect stillness and your mind dissolves into quiet knowing, recognize that something profound has shifted within you. Not because anything has been added to what you are, but because what was always true has been allowed to emerge without resistance. You are not becoming enlightened through hearing these teachings. You are recognizing the enlightenment that has never been absent from your experience. You are not developing divine love. You are acknowledging the love that is your essential nature. You are not creating inner peace. You are discovering the peace that exists as the very ground of your being when you stop creating disturbance through false beliefs about who you think you are. In this moment of profound rest, in this space of infinite stillness, in this recognition of what has always been present, all seeking comes to its natural conclusion. Not because you've found what you were looking for, but because you've realized you never lost it. The journey continues, but now it's not a journey towards something missing. It's the endless exploration of what you are, the infinite discovery of how divine consciousness can express through your unique perspective and circumstances. You are the light that illuminates every experience. You are the love that connects all beings. You are the peace that remains constant through every change. You are the wisdom that knows without learning. You are the presence that gives meaning to every moment. This is not what you will become. This is what you have never stopped being. Rest now in this recognition. Let it permeate every cell of your body, every thought in your mind, every feeling in your heart. You are home. You have always been home. Welcome to the remembrance of who you really are. The silence between these words carries more truth than any explanation could contain. As consciousness rests in its own recognition of itself, as the mind releases its grip on complexity and settles into simple being, something extraordinary reveals itself. Not through effort or understanding, but through the gentle dissolution of everything that seemed to separate you from what you've always been. This recognition doesn't announce itself with fanfare or dramatic revelation. It arrives like dawn breaking across a landscape that was always there but couldn't be seen in darkness. Each moment of genuine understanding, each instant of authentic presence, each breath of conscious awareness adds another degree of light to what was never actually hidden, only temporarily overlooked. You've spent your entire life searching for something that was never missing. You've pursued completeness while being already whole. You've sought love while being love itself. You've chased peace while resting in the very ground of all tranquility. This isn't poetic metaphor. This is the literal truth of your existence, revealed not through belief, but through direct recognition. Consider what happens when you stop trying to become something you already are, when you cease the exhausting effort of acquiring what you've never lacked, when you release the desperate attempt to fix what was never broken. In that cessation, in that profound letting go, what remains? What persists when all seeking ends? What continues when all effort dissolves? What remains is what you are. What persists is your essential nature. What continues is the eternal presence that has witnessed every experience, survived every change, remained constant through every transformation. This presence doesn't come and go. It doesn't improve or deteriorate. It doesn't succeed or fail. It simply is, and in its simple being, It reveals the foundation upon which all existence rests. But here's what makes this recognition so immediately practical, so utterly transformative of daily experience. When you know yourself as this unchanging awareness, everything that appears within awareness becomes workable. Problems don't disappear, but they lose their power to define your fundamental well being. Challenges continue arising, but they become opportunities for consciousness to express its infinite creativity rather than threats to your imagined security. Relationships transform when you stop trying to get something from others and start expressing what you are through connection. Work becomes meaningful when you stop seeking fulfillment in outcomes and start finding purpose in the quality of presence you bring to each task. Even mundane activities become sacred when performed from the recognition that there's no separation between the one who acts and the awareness in which all action appears. This understanding reveals why every spiritual teaching throughout history has pointed toward the same essential recognition, though expressed through different languages, cultures, and traditions. The words change, the methods vary, the practices differ, but the fundamental truth remains constant. What you seek, you are. What you long for, you already possess. What you hope to become, you have never stopped being. Most people miss this because they're looking in the wrong direction. They search outside themselves for what can only be found within. They seek in future moments what's only available now. They pursue in complex practices what's revealed through simple presence. They demand dramatic experiences when the most profound truth is available in ordinary awareness of ordinary experience. This is why these teachings were called good news, not because they promise future rewards or special states of consciousness, but because they reveal that what you most deeply desire is your current reality when seen without the filters of false belief, mental commentary, and emotional resistance. The kingdom of heaven isn't a place you go, it's where you are when you stop imagining you're somewhere else. As your body continues its perfect rest and your mind settles into deeper stillness, notice how effortless this recognition becomes. You don't have to maintain it through concentration or preserve it through spiritual techniques. It maintains itself because it's what you are, not what you do. It preserves itself because it's your essential nature, not a temporary state you achieve. These ancient teachings have shown you something that changes everything. You are not separate from the divine source you've been seeking. Every word tonight has pointed to the same eternal truth. What you've been searching for has never been missing. The love you crave, the peace you pursue, the wisdom you seek. These aren't achievements to earn, but qualities to recognize as your essential nature. As you rest in this recognition, let it transform every moment of your waking life. You are home.